So we are so glad that you could find time in your Friday afternoon. We know you're busy to come and join us to learn about the Part 1 application for Principal and Supervisor of the Year. My name is Lauren Huddleston. I work with the Educator Effectiveness team with the Department of Education. My wonderful supervisor, Martha. Introduce yourself. She's here too.
Yes, happy Friday, everybody, or close to Friday as we can possibly get without it being Friday. I am Martha Moore. I'm the Senior Director of Educator Effectiveness, and I will say that the recognition work is probably the most favorite part of what I get to do through the course of time, and working with Lauren makes that even better. So welcome. We are glad to have you, and do not hesitate to use the chat to ask questions or to just jump in if you have questions through the course of the day.
Awesome. So let's get started. The program goals for the Principal of the Year and the Supervisor of the Year programs are to recognize and honor outstanding school and district leaders across Tennessee. We applaud principals and supervisors who demonstrate superior abilities in managing and motivating students, faculties, and staff, evoking high standards, demonstrating a commitment to excellence, implementing innovative programs, and having a track record of exceptional gains in student learning. This webinar will provide an overview of the Tennessee Principal and Supervisor of the Year Part 1 application to highlight some best practices from the guidebooks for applicants. That said, I'm going to drop a link in the chat to the Principal of the Year guidebook that is posted online and the Supervisor of the Year guidebook. These are really wonderful resources, and I hope if you haven't had the time to look at them yet, you do take some time to see what they have to offer. Our hope is that following completion of this webinar, you'll be able to identify the components of the Part 1 application and identify some best practices for how to approach these components. To make the best use of our Friday afternoon time today, please remain on mute throughout the session until the question and answer section at the end. If you have questions or comments during the presentation, please put them in the chat and we will be sure to address them. We'll also be using the chat to learn some more about you and your goals. To get started, please answer the following question in the chat. What is one thing you hope to gain from this session today? Information about video, how to have some tips and tricks for the video response question, how to better answer the other questions in the application, the process, Part 1. These are all things that we are going to talk about today, and hopefully you walk away feeling a little bit more confident in how to approach this. A quick refresher on how selections progress with applications. After you've been nominated at the district level, this is the competition in the region level selection process. So Part 1 of the application is due by March 13th, and you can find the Part 1 application on the Tennessee Principal and Supervisor of the Year websites, as well as the direct email sent to you in January. I'm going to drop a link to the recognition website as well. The Part 1 application contains basic information about yourself and your school or your district, 2 written response questions, 1 video response question, and an optional area to submit up to 5 pages of supporting documentation. After all applications are submitted, regional scoring committees will identify 3 region-level semifinalists for each of the 9 regions, for a total of 27 region-level semifinalists across the state. All region-level applicants will be notified of their application decision by April 29th of this year. Now let's dive a bit more deeply into the Part 1 application components. The first section is basic information, and it is not scored. It includes demographic information, information about your professional background, and your school and/or district information. Please note that demographic information will not be shared with the review committee, and the Tennessee Principal and Supervisors of the Year will be selected without regard to race, color, religion, sex, age, or national origin, and will not be discriminated against on the basis of disability. This information is primarily collected for program monitoring and evaluation purposes. The second section, response questions, includes 2 written responses that are limited to 750 words each. We'll explore more about those questions in just a moment. The third section is the video response that's limited to 5 minutes total. We'll explore that a little bit later in this presentation. And finally, the fourth section is optional supporting documentation. Supporting documentation is permitted to provide additional evidence for references made in your extended responses. Some examples of supporting documentation include student success data, project plans, parent or community communications materials, or things like that. Supporting documentation is completely optional, and choosing not to submit supporting documentation will not penalize you in any way. If you choose to submit supporting documentation, it's limited to 5 pages maximum. Anything over 5 pages will not be shared with the reviewing committee. So, a little pop quiz sounds way too harsh for a Friday afternoon. What section will not be shared with the reviewing committee? Is it basic information, response questions, video response question, or the supporting documentation? Please answer in the chat. Basic information, A, you guys all pass with flying colors. That's right, the basic information is not shared with the reviewing committee, and that is really just for our own tracking purposes. So let's look more closely at the response questions. On the Part 1 application, applicants will respond to 2 response questions that each have a 750 word limit. 750 words is probably a lot longer than what you're thinking. You have a lot of space to elaborate in these responses. The questions for Principal and Supervisor of the Year are very similar, but differ across programs based on the applicant's role. Principal of the Year questions ask about the school level, and Supervisor of the Year questions ask about the district level. The questions generally are, how do you strategically engage with community stakeholders to support your school or district's mission, vision, and goals? And how do you define diversity within your school or district and community? In this context, what does it mean to have a commitment to diversity as a school or district leader? How have you applied this commitment in your school or district and community? 2 questions, very similar for both programs. The guidebooks for applicants include guidance and exemplars to help you craft your Part 1 application, including this checklist of questions to help you address common missteps that we've seen in other applications in years past. Though a strong response may look different for each written response prompt, these guiding questions can help you ensure that the components of your application complement one another and give the most comprehensive view of your excellence as a leader. First, are you answering the question? Take time to unpack the question and think about what it's asking. Ask someone else to read your response and ask if they can determine the question being addressed. You can also ask someone else who knows you well for feedback regarding the completeness of your answer. Next, are you answering all parts of the question? Use the unpacking strategy from the guidebook to ensure that you plan for and address all parts of the prompt with sufficient detail. Next, are you giving a comprehensive picture of yourself as a leader throughout all responses? Try to avoid using the same example or idea in your response to each question. Your goal is to give a complete picture. Finally, are you writing to show what leadership and learning looks like in your space? Write to show and not tell. Use examples and stories of things that students, parents, or colleagues have said or done. Show how your work influenced the learning and growth of others through examples and evidence. Highlight your accomplishments rather than being humble about them. This is not the time to be humble. Write through the word count in your draft. Sometimes it takes writers some time to get to the best part of their responses, so begin by writing more than what you need and then strategically edit to meet the word count. Sometimes when we're writing, we start writing and we realize we're going a different place with the answer, and that's the place we want to get. So just write it all out and then edit it down, usually in a Word document. Save it before you submit.
I want to hop in here and just reinforce something that Lauren said. It is not a time to be humble. As educators, we tend to always put the responsibility or put the joy on somebody else. The mistakes are mine, the successes are yours. This is the time to actually really unpack your successes and own the place that you shine within those. And it's also the place where your colleagues can help you, letting someone else look at what you're writing and say, you know, this is true, but what you really did or what you missed in what you are saying is where you pushed in and you leaned in and you really empowered people. So let that shine. Don't be humble here. Really tell your story.
Excellent advice. So let's look more closely now at the video response question. On this part of the application, you'll respond to one video response question with a 5-minute time limit. The questions are very similar but differ across the programs based on your role. For Principal of the Year, applicants will respond to the following prompt. What is the story of your school and what role do you play in that story? Include evidence to support your response. For Supervisor of the Year, applicants will respond to the prompt, what is the story of your district and how have you played a role in that story? Include evidence to support your response. Now, here are some best practices for video response. This is all in the program guidebook as well. First, utilize this checklist of questions to think about what you're going to say before you say it. Having a practice round or two never hurts anyone. Are you answering the question? Are you answering all parts of the question? Are you giving a comprehensive picture of yourself as a leader throughout all responses? Are you telling a story to show what leadership and learning looks like in your space? Ensure that reviewers have viewing access throughout the review period. To create a link to your video, consider uploading it to YouTube, Google Drive, Dropbox, or a similar file sharing website. Please select the viewing privacy settings and/or permissions to anyone with a link can view to ensure that all of our reviewers can access your video. Don't delete your video or move your video until after you've received the notification from the program coordinator that scoring has been completed. Next, maximize the quality of your audio. Clear audio is crucial to a great video. If possible, be sure to record in a quiet room. You might want to use earbuds with a microphone. If you're not able to use an external microphone or earbuds, stay within about 1 to 1.5 feet of the microphone on your recording device. Next, follow all school and district level media policies. If you choose to include photos or videos of students, ensure that you are following these media policies and privacy guidelines. As a best practice, all students featured in your video should have a current media release on file. Now, your video does not need to be Oscar award winning. Talking to your computer is perfectly fine. What's most important is you, and that we can understand and get a better idea of who you are. So having this recording in your office, one-on-one, you and your computer, perfectly fine for a video. Please do not think you need to splice a bunch of things together in a 5-minute video.
And if you have access to like what I'm imagining that your high school might have a visual arts team that really is good in this space, it's a great time to reach out to those folks and use those kids that have those skills of editing videos. So, you know, you can do what we're doing right now. You can hop on your computer, you can create a video, and that works just fine. Please don't think that you have to get all kinds of fancy. But you can also use some of those skill sets that live in your district or in your school to help you out in this space.
Absolutely. Our next little pop quiz question. True or false, video quality and composition are a scored component of the video response? In other words, if having a more fancy video, is that going to give you a higher score? Did I just say more fancier? They're going to revoke my English degree. Right, that's false. You do not need to be more fancier in your responses. Video responses are scored on the basis of your spoken response. More better, that's right. Should have gone with that one. Now let's look at the optional component, supporting documentation. Supporting documentation is permitted to provide additional evidence for references made in your extended responses in those first two questions or your video response. Some examples of supporting documentation include student success data, project plans, parent or community communications, materials, and so on. Once again, please ensure all supporting documentation adheres to your school and/or district's privacy policies and media releases. Also, it's important to note that the application, including supporting documentation, will be redacted for identifying information to reduce potential unconscious bias. Anything that's written, we're going to redact it so that names, particular names of places or schools or people, are not visible to the reviewers. It's best to ensure that your supporting documentation is still easily understood without logos, names, or specific addresses. Supporting documentation is completely optional. Choosing not to submit supporting documentation will not penalize your application in any way. If you do choose to submit supporting documentation, it's limited to 5 pages maximum for this first application. Anything after 5 pages will not be given to the review committee. Now let's look at a few best practices for supporting documentation. First, consider how you're going to directly connect your supporting documentation to your written responses. Do not rely on your supporting documentation to make your case for you. This supporting documentation should not be a substitute for high-quality explanation in the narrative, nor stand alone as extraneous information. Effective supporting documentation should extend a reviewer's understanding of your written responses by directly connecting to aspects of the narrative where additional evidence, such as student data, may make your writing clearer. Also, ensure that each page of the supporting documentation demonstrates Principal and Supervisor of the Year criteria. In some cases, you may identify that the written response prompts do not permit you to share characteristics of your leadership or specific experiences that fully demonstrate your ability to serve as Principal or Supervisor of the Year. Like the best practice above, effective supporting documentation can serve to expand your reviewer's understanding of your ability to meet the criteria. To ensure that reviewers understand what they are viewing and why it's important, be sure to provide notes with relevant information and context for any materials not directly addressed in the narrative. So if you're providing some charts or if you're providing some pictures, it's always a good idea to have a sentence or two next to those to say, this is what this is what this is from, you know, something that you wrote about earlier. Here's a picture from it. Here's something related to it, maybe a data point or something of that sort. Any questions about supporting documentation before I go on? All right. Now let's talk about scoring. You might be wondering how part 1 will be scored. Each written response question will be scored individually and will be assessed according to the degree to which the response adheres to standard grammar, spelling, and punctuation conventions, answers the question clearly and concisely, and provides a compelling narrative that speaks to the applicant's ability to serve as Tennessee Principal or Supervisor of the Year. The video response question will be assessed according to the degree to which the response has the following desirable qualities. First, delivery is made according to the instructions, you're on topic, and you follow the time limit. Next, the candidate displays qualities of confidence, optimism, and sincerity. And finally, the message is well organized, easy to follow and understand, and relevant. In our prior webinar, we had a few principals and supervisors of the year talk about how they wrote things out, how they used a teleprompter app, how they used all these different things to make sure that they were really giving their message in the best way. Then after that is scored, the entire application will be given a holistic score, including both the written response questions, the video response question, as well as any supporting documentation if it's included. The holistic score will be assigned based on the degree to which the applicant demonstrates Tennessee Principal and Supervisor of the Year criteria. Each application will be reviewed by 2 to 3 reviewers from across the state, and the top 3 scorers in each region will be selected as region level semifinalists. All finalists will be notified of their application decision by April 29th, and then the Part 2 application will be shared with those region level semifinalists at that time. There's a lot of information. So, what questions do you have for us? What are you wondering about? What are you thinking about? What can we help you with?
The amount of help people need on Friday afternoon is very different than the amount of help they need on Tuesday afternoon.
All right, I'm going to drop some links into the chat in case you would like to review them at your leisure. So this first one is the Principal of the Year Guidebook. Now, this one is the Supervisor of the Year Guidebook. These have really great examples of written responses and answering the questions. Here is our educator recognition website. It's got everything on it, including at some point, hopefully next week, a link to this webinar if you would like to review it again. Supporting documentation must be uploaded just prior to submitting. They cannot be saved and resumed. I believe that is correct. I think perhaps a best practice that we didn't refer to in how to actually complete the physical steps of completing the application is typing out your answers in a Word document. You should have access to one from the website, reviewing that, and then getting it ready to all submit at once. You can save and come back to it on the actual website. I think it's best to just get it all done and saved in a Word document and then submit it all at once. You're welcome.
If you think of questions as time passes or as you dive into your work in your application, feel free to reach out to us. We will help as much as possible outside the webinars. There may be office hours. I'm not positive when those are, but I'll let Lauren speak to that.
That's right here, Martha. It's like a bad infomercial. It's a Friday. So we do have office hours every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. Central Time. Feel free to hop in. You don't need to email to schedule anything. The link that was in your webinar registration, and I believe was in the original email, should be good for all of our office hours. They're recurring weekly. We're happy to answer any questions that you have, look at things, make sure your links work, all that good stuff. So please do not hesitate to use them. All right, one more participation question. As a result of this webinar today, what next step are you going to take to prepare for your process and for your application submission? Starting drafting your answers. Sometimes I find that scrolling on my phone and looking at past pictures helps jog my memory of things. Do not let social media fool you into thinking it's useless. Gathering thoughts and ideas, start answering the questions now, talking to people, seeing how they see you, maybe things you might be forgetting about. And remember, 750 words. When in doubt, write more. All right. Thank you so much for coming. We have a survey to get some feedback on how we did, how we answered your questions, or how we, explained things to you. So please feel free to take this survey today, either now, before you leave, after you leave. We firmly believe that Tennessee is able to set all students on a path to success because of excellent people like you. And we really hope you're going to consider putting yourself forward to receive the celebration that you deserve through submitting your Part 1 of the application. Thank you so much for coming. And if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us, hang out afterwards, send us an email. We are happy to help in whatever way that we can. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Stay warm.